What if I told you that one of the best offlaners in the game was a fish? No, not that fish. That one's too basic. This fish. Everybody hates this hero, except for carries, because they get to play him. But guess what? By the end of this video, you will understand why Slark offlane will soon be his most hated role, even more than carry. But you're not ready to understand quite yet, because you don't know the build. First, select offlane. Then, naturally, you should make it look like you're perusing normal offlaners like Underlord and Centaur, while typing, I'm building a Vanguard. Once your supports have picked their Crystal Maidens and so forth, switch to Slark and then lock in. Start with this inventory. Yep, that's right, literally nothing. Move your career here on Dire, or here if you're on Radiant. You'll be using this guy to purchase a Ring of Health once you get the Bounty Room Gold. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We have a pregame to win. Pregame is very important because until the 0-second mark, it's night. Slark, because he's a fish, and of course everybody knows that fish have great eyesight, has 1800 night vision, compared to the average hero's 800 night vision. So you want to abuse this. Run to whatever location you think the enemy team is likely to ward. Mid is always a pretty good bet, but I personally like running here, because a lot of people just lazily plop a ward in this OP spot. Best case, you score a free deward and gain a huge advantage in whatever lane you dewarded, and worst case, you scout the enemies for your idiot team, and so they don't feed going for the bounty runes in pregame. Congratulations, you just won pregame with 0 items. That's enough of pregame, let's talk laning. There are 3 brain-dead rules to win the laning stage on Slark, all of which we will talk about in a little bit more detail. Rule number 1, hit the carry. Rule number 2, drag creep aggro until you get a Vanguard or boots. Rule number 3, play on the same side as your support. Let's talk about this one first. If Slark hits you, of course, he gains a stack of Essence Shift. Because of the strength loss, this effectively deals 22 pure damage, and he gains 3 agility for 20 seconds, which equates to 3 damage, 3 attack speed, and 0.6 armor. In other words, the longer the laning stage goes normally, as in every time they walk up for a CS, you hit them a bit, and every time you walk up for a CS, they hit you a bit, you're happy, because you are going to take better trades. At some point, they'll run out of regen before you do, or they'll let you get enough stacks of Essence Shift that you can kill them. However, that does bring me to this rule. Because you're a pathetic melee guy, when you walk up to hit the carry, both the support and the carry should hit you, unless they've gone AFK eating a bag of chips. And because of this, you want to drag the creep aggro as far back as possible. That way, they hit you less, and if they do want to hit you, then they have to step farther out of position to do so. If you're taking really great trades and dominating the lane, then you can grab a pair of boots. That way, you can get more hits in on the carry when they do walk up to CS. If there's more getting ass beaten than beating ass, then rush a Vanguard and continue to play somewhat passive. While this is happening, you have to pay attention to the third and final rule. Slark +1 hero is pretty much a guaranteed kill on any position 5. So, if your support is playing on the left, then you play on the left. If your support is playing on the right, then you play on the right. The big early game power spike is boots, Vanguard, and level 6. Once you hit this, not a single hero in Dota can kill you. So, use this power effectively. Be the best offlaner that you can be. Make the enemy carry's life a living hell. Remember, if you weren't Slark doing this to them, they would be Slark doing this to you. Dive them and spam literally all of your stuff on them. When the carry fucks off, and believe me, eventually they will, that, my friends, is when you start being a greedy rat. Cut the wave, farm the enemy jungle, and grab every bounty rune in Lotus until you get to your first big item. Next, let's talk itemization. If you're hard countered, you can go for utility items like Piping Greaves, utilizing the Vanguard Disassemble. This itemization essentially makes you uncounterable, because these heroes only counter the traditional playstyle of Slark. But if you want to rupture a Slark with Greaves and a pipe, go right ahead. If you're not hard countered, then build into Diffusal first, then Echo Saber, then disassemble the Echo Saber and use it to build an Ags. Keep in mind that sometimes you can be playing the utility Slark, but then you feel like your team is having no problem surviving teamfights. In this case, you can build into a Diffusal and start transitioning to the more carry style build. On that note, in fights with the utility build, your focus is on tanking spells. How do you accomplish this? Jump squishy backliners, so the enemy team has to press stuff on you. With the carry build, your focus is on jumping heroes that you know you can kill with your pounce and your ult, aka the squishy backliners. In other words, no matter what build you do, you should jump backliners, that's your job. This is precisely why pivoting from the utility build to the carry build works so perfectly, because the playstyle doesn't change. But wait a minute, did you notice anything missing here? Pause the video, and if you're a Giga Chad, comment what's missing in both of these builds. That's right, guy that got it right. It's Aghanim Shard. This thing is fucking bonkers. Did you know that it straight up cancels duel, even if Legion is on your team? Depth Shroud is just about the best counter-initiation ability in Dota currently. A motherfucker who just qualified for the major by playing a shit ton of offlane Slark gets this thing pretty much as soon as the clock hits 15 minutes. Then, he uses it to counter-initiate important spells for his team, or to extend his regular ultimate on himself. But we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves, so let's take a step back for a bit. This is all assuming that a fight is already happening, but how you actually get to the fight on offlane Slark is quite possibly the most important thing about this hero. So let's talk about it. Once you have your first big item, which is usually a pipe or a diffusal, you're almost ready to go. Next, all you need to do is wait for it to hit nighttime. Then you begin the process that I like to call the murder walk. It sounded better in my head, whatever, because either you'll be murdering heroes or wards. The process: step 1, run across the map. Step 2, if your passive turns off, then you stop to deward. Step 3, if your passive stays active the entire time, then think about what that means for a second. You were just here, and now you're here. You just made it all the way across the map undetected. By the process of elimination, an enemy will be near you farming, and they don't know that you are there. So, kill them and repeat this process. And here's where we circle back to something that I said at the very start of the video. This process is precisely why Slark is a better offlaner than he is a carry. To put it bluntly, he is the best hero in the game at standing right in front of your fucking face and pressuring you because he can just Dark Pact and run away. Worst case, if there are no heroes to pressure, then you are dewarding the entire map, and best case, you are applying a shit ton of pressure. This is the dream job for any offlaner. With all of that being said, let's take a look at the science of dewarding on Slark, so when you do run into a ward, you can deward it easily and quickly. Dewarding on Slark is a science, but it's a science like an apple falling from a tree and bonking a guy on the head is a science. It's very simple, but delving deeper into the mechanics of it teaches you a lot about the world, or in this case, the world of Dota. The #1 rule of dewarding on Slark is use the shadows to your advantage. For the uninitiated, Slark ult deactivates when you're in vision. This means that if you enter into enemy observer ward vision, you'll see the ult buff fade away from your UI. If you walk out of vision, the ult will activate again after 0.5 seconds. Basic Dota mechanics can be abused to locate the exact location of a ward by spending a bit of time searching. For instance, take a look at this clip right here. As Slark walks up the high ground, he notices that his ult turns off, but there's nobody in sight, meaning that he's standing on a ward. Once he hits this location, the ult turns back on again after the 0.5 second delay. That means that this cliff is now blocking Slark from the ward's vision. So he has narrowed down the ward's location to be north of the cliff. So the trick here is to find an exact spot that you can stand behind a tree, where if you move just a little bit, your ult turns off again. In this moment, pay attention to how the shadows move. When the shadows cover a spot and Slark's ult turns back on again, it means that that new sliver of shadow is exactly where the ward is. To be frank, this is part of what makes Slark such a menace right now. Sentries are a limited resource and the map is gigantic, so it's very hard for supports to confidently deward everything. But since sentry range is so huge now, you can typically go plunking sentry wards around like this and nailing D-wards. This is why any Slark worth their salt will always walk around with at least 2 sentries in their backpack. The basic mid-game rotation for Slark is to run around killing wards and murdering people while pushing lanes and jungling camps when the enemies are basically hiding from you. Your eventual build is as follows: utility items if the game calls for it, then diffusal into Ag Scepter, picking up the Ag Shard as soon as possible. Then you can build either a Mage Slayer or a Harpoon with your Oblivion Staff depending on if there's a shitload of magical damage or if you're getting kited. After that, some nice options are Nullifier if they have a lot of 4 staffs and glimmers, Gem if you're running out of sentries, Octarine Core if you just want to press stuff more, or BKB if you're a baby back bitch. Also, here's the talents that you should go for. Pretty much every game has Slark. As a final segment, let's do a lightning round where I will quickly cover the most important tech that you need to know if you want to be a master Slark. Trick number 1, use the force movement hotkey. When holding down the forced movement hotkey, your hero runs in the direction you click without considering pathing. In other words, you can use this to face a certain direction over tree lines and cliffs that would normally turn you in a stupid direction. Without this hotkey, this is what happens because of trees. With this hotkey, however, this is what happens. Trick number 2. If you are laning with another melee hero, do a creep drag. Sometimes you end up with 2 melee heroes in the offlane, and in this case, you or your support can grab the second creep wave like this. Then, you drag it here, making sure to block the camp, eventually pulling it behind your tier 1 and catching your wave. This will give you a few free levels and farm, and if you're still struggling, you can just do it over and over again. Trick number 3. Essence Shift has a tiny ass range. To gain permanent agility on Slark, you either need to land the killing blow on a hero, or be within 300 range. To give you some perspective on how small this is, Dark Pact is a 325 range. So, if you want to farm permanent stacks on this hero, make sure that you are standing right on top of people.